Hello and welcome back to Wheels and Things. Today we are going to get a tour of the Fiat 500 Abarth. I've had this car for almost a month now, just a few days short, and I think it's been long enough where I can actually give you guys a full tour and make sure I cover everything. So let's start with the outside. So the first thing you probably notice about this car is its size. It's pretty small, and when you look from the back, you'll actually see it's really narrow too. It's pretty short front to back, but it's kind of interesting how both the back and the front kind of slope up from front to back. Another thing about it is the wheels. These are really tiny wheels. These particular wheels are 16 inches. You can get 17 inches from the factory, or you could when this car was still made. But this one came with 16-inch wheels, rolling on 195 45 R16 tires. So a pretty small wheel and tire package overall. As pointed out by other reviewers, even though this is a Fiat product, or technically a Fiat Chrysler product, here in America it's more Chrysler than anything. You actually see some Chrysler stickers under the hood. But other than that, most of the badges on this are Abarth badges or Abarth symbols. So wheel caps, Abarth, badge behind the door, Abarth. Nothing to indicate this is a Fiat anywhere else. Abarth is even on the wheels right here. So not much special to say about the mirrors other than the driver's side mirror has an awesome little blind spot mirror. In America, the driver's side mirror has to be flat, so your angle of view is pretty limited. So it's super cool that they put a little wide angle mirror on this side here. Really helps with visibility and really eliminates the blind spot. On the passenger side, we don't get anything special, just a normal convex mirror, which honestly isn't convex enough for my taste. I find the passenger side has the worst blind spot on this car. Working our way around to the front, you'll start to see how narrow this car is. And again, no Fiat logos anywhere on the front of the car. VIN number right here indicates this car was made in Mexico, as I mentioned before. So when looking at this front grille, it looks pretty diminutive, as in there's no big gaping holes anywhere. However, it's actually super functional. This little slit right here opens up to the radiator behind and cools the radiator, as does this part down here. However, this vent right here and the accompanying one on the side is actually completely functional. When Fiat turboed the Abarth, they couldn't find a spot to put a large front mount intercooler, so they broke the intercooler up into two separate sections. One little intercooler sits right here where the air goes in here and out the side, and same on the other side. Air inlet here and air outlet on the side. Additionally, there's actually some ventilation around the Abarth logo here. You might not notice from afar, but the spaces here around the logo are actually open to the radiator and not closed off like you might think. Up front, there's nothing too interesting about the headlights. I was actually surprised that this car had daytime running lights. Even being a 2012, they have daytime running lights integrated down here on both sides. You can set those to be on or off actually in the gauge cluster. I leave them on, so they're on all the time. The blinkers are integrated into the DRL housing. And there's also an additional blinker over here on the side marker. The fog lights are turned on from the center console, but you can see them here. Another interesting thing to note is that when the headlight's on, you get a little marker light on the side right here. I haven't seen that in other cars, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I noticed it first when I was taking apart the bumper, wondering why this reflector needed to be plugged in, but sure enough, there's a little marker light right there. It could be that in other cars it's integrated into the headlight or the blinker, but not on this one. One interesting thing to note is that the windshield wiper blades are vastly different sizes. This large one covers most of the windshield and is extremely long, whereas this short one over here is probably less than half the length. If you've been following my channel, you've already seen under the hood of this car, but I always find it super cool how, normal hood latch like everything else, but the little hood prop over here is so tiny, but it does such a good job. Nothing too crazy going on under here, just the engine bay, really narrow, like probably less than 2 feet deep. Everything's really jammed in here. The normally aspirated engine would sit right here as well, but with the turbo crammed all in around here, makes this engine pretty tight. There's no 50-50 weight distribution here. You can see the top of the shock tower here. and basically that puts the entire engine in front of the driveline. If you look under the car, the entire driveline actually runs behind the engine. If you look right here, you can see one of the few Fiat logos on this car. Let's see if it'll focus right here on the windshield. There you go. You can see that Fiat made an interesting decision. It seems like right here we've got plastic pieces on the Abarth, and these seem to be for compliance reasons because the wheel might stick outside of the fender, and that's not allowed in the United States on cars that are being sold off the lot. So it looks like they stuck this on there. However, I'm thinking that with the 16-inch wheel and tire package, you didn't really have that problem unless they consider down here sticking out. It does a little bit without this plastic piece, but I'm guessing if you got the larger 17-inch wheels and tires, this would be absolutely necessary. So in the back, nothing too exciting here. All the lamps back here are incandescent. Another Abarth logo. This one, nothing special about it. This car does have a rear windshield wiper. I was actually kind of surprised. I thought that would be one of the things they left off, and it does have a pretty serious spoiler. Apparently for the regular Fiat 500 version, the designer didn't want a spoiler on there because he thought it ruined the look. However, it seriously decreased the drag coefficient to add a spoiler to it. This one doesn't have much of a lip, so we're not creating any crazy amount of downforce here in the Abarth. I think it's mostly for looks. One of the craziest things about this car that's really unique as a small car is actually how large this trunk lid is. Because of the way the car slopes forward, the trunk lid is, or the hatchback if you prefer, is quite long. And when you go to open it, it comes out towards you quite a bit. It's a very interesting design, and I'll show you from the side what that looks like. So as I was mentioning, the trunk lid is really interesting. It actually comes way out beyond the back of the car as you open it, more than other trunk lids that I've seen because of the angle, and then it has to go way up. So with the trunk lid open, you get quite a bit of space back here, but it's kind of unique. Another thing that I've mentioned before is it's really common for this part right here to fail. This is the trunk popper. So if you are buying one, watch out for that. But it is an electronic popper. And as I open the trunk, it's actually really interesting as well. If you open it only up to here, it's going to immediately fall back down and close. So you really have to get it quite high before it will even support itself. So again, just a little bit of a unique thing about that. Once you're in here, there's actually quite a lot of space. The trunk is actually kind of shaped like this. If this is the back of the car angles, and the seats are fairly vertical. So you actually get quite a bit of space down here. But as you can see right here, it's only about a hand width deep. So your space is really shaped like this. You can't stick anything up here because of the slope of the back of the car. So while it is practical in some regards, you're not going to be putting extremely tall objects in here without putting down the seats. And in that regard, putting down the seats is super easy because the button is right here. So while you're right here, you can just flop these guys forward and put whatever you need in there. While I'm back here, one note on the seat flopping forward. As you can see, it is certainly not a flat load floor. These seats, this is down, and while you could take the headrest out and get it a little bit flatter, this is what you're going to end up with most of the time. So again, you will have a lot of space, but it's not going to be a flat load floor or anything special like that. But I was able to get my acoustic guitar in here actually fit in the back seat sideways. It is interesting to note that the back also kind of tapers in this direction. So while this is fairly wide, it's even wider up in the back seat. So if you have something that's too wide to fit in the trunk, fit it in the back seat. Obviously won't work if you're carrying people, but this is not a carry lots of people and lots of stuff at the same time type of car, in case you were wondering. So this is also probably, while this car has the smallest hood and the smallest hood prop I've ever seen, it also has the smallest cargo cover I've ever seen. It does the job, but you almost wonder why they bothered. I do like it though because it does give you an enclosed trunk space in the end like most of their hatchbacks, and so that makes it worthwhile. Really simple to remove it. I wanted to remove it to point out one thing. So over here you can see this is the mechanism that holds the back seat in place. One thing that's super annoying about putting the seats back up, while I can totally reach in and grab the seat, as I will in a minute, this seat belt is always perfectly in the way of the mechanism that latches the seat in place. And as you can see, it's gotten clipped in there a couple times. So anytime you go to put the seat up, you have to manually make sure to move this seat belt out of the way before you can clip the seat in place. So inconvenient, but not the end of the world. So right up here you can see one of the places where cost cutting has taken place. There's no handle except this little pole to close the trunk. So, you know, while most other places the car seems pretty well put together, in the interior in certain places you notice that this is a very inexpensive solution to have a trunk handle. So I want to apologize for the car being so dirty. It's springtime, so we get both rain and bugs. So driving anywhere, you basically get dirt all over the car. And I could probably give this car a good wax or ceramic coating or something and that would fix it up, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet because it was just winter a couple weeks ago. One of the coolest things about this car is the exhaust sound straight from the factory. As far as I can tell, this car is completely stock and it sounds awesome. Take a listen. I don't have much else to say back here. This guy is one of the fake grills on the car. Doesn't do anything. You can see right through it. I don't know, maybe it's kind of a little diffuser or something, but I wouldn't count on it. One more vent I almost forgot to mention. This guy is totally real. Goes into the wheel, I assume for brake cooling. As an engineer, I'm always looking out for things that were clearly designed to be a certain way. I find that entertaining for some reason, but one of those things is this antenna. You can see that the antenna is mere inches, centimeters away from this open trunk. The other thing that had to be designed properly is the sunroof. It too is inches away from the antenna. So basically this exact spot at that exact angle is the only place the antenna could have gone without interfering with the sunroof and or the hatch. Speaking of the sunroof, this thing is actually really big. It's a huge piece of glass that covers the whole width of the roof, and it's on these tracks that allow it to slide all the way back over the second half of the roof. Probably one of the biggest sunroofs I've seen on one of the smallest cars I've ever had. Let's talk styling. Obviously this guy was a retro-inspired car modeled after the original Fiat 500. So the styling tries to keep it pretty true to that, and it does pretty well in both overall size, profile, and shape. Obviously it's a little bit bigger than, a lot bigger than the original 500 for safety reasons, modern airbags, crumple zones, etc. But it still stays true to the original design, which I like a lot. Overall, I think it's a really nicely styled car. For most Americans, including myself, the proportions are a little bit strange. The thing that weirds me out the most is how narrow the car is. I think the narrowness is actually one thing that's pretty unique about this car, and maybe it's how narrow and tall it is at the same time. It's actually not that short compared to a Miata or something else like that that has similar width. This guy's quite tall, so maybe that's why it looks a little strange from the back. Even Fiestas and other subcompact cars, the Honda Fit, while they are narrow and tall, they've never quite reached the level of this guy. I think that about wraps up the exterior. Let's look inside. So in the Abarth, the front seat's actually a pretty nice place to be. Of course, it's all manual. You've got vertical seat adjustment here. You've got over on the middle, you actually have the recline function. One thing that's kind of strange about this car is there's no center console right here. They do give you an armrest, but unfortunately almost every Fiat 500 I've ever seen has this cushion come off. So you're left with just a plastic shell. You'd think it'd be as simple as snapping it back on, but it seems that a large percentage of the tabs have broken off, both on the armrest cushion and on the receiving end of this this plastic holder. So most of the time, I just leave this folded up out of the way and I don't get a center armrest. Now, as for the back seat, you can get into it by pulling up this red strap. Front seat slides forward. And now I'm in the back seat. Once you're in here, you're definitely gonna have to put those back headrests up. You might be able to see this one. It's down right now, so you have some rearward visibility. But once you get back here and put these up, that basically robs the driver of really any rearward visibility out this side right here. Thankfully, there's only 2 seats back here, so you never have to worry about a center passenger. It was wise they did that. There's no way 3 people could get back here. Once I'm back here, the legroom's actually not that bad for someone who's about 5'8". The seat right now is further back than I would have it, and maybe even more reclined too. That seems about normal, but it's actually surprisingly roomy back here. Unfortunately, like I said, I am only 5'8", and when I actually lean my head back, the headroom's pretty short, so you wouldn't want any tall people riding back here, or at least not people with tall torsos. From the back seat, the amenities back here are 2 cup holders, and that's about it. You get a speaker in the door, you get a little window that doesn't roll down, and as I mentioned already, the headrest takes up the majority of the space back here. You'll see it actually, your head basically lives right here at the trunk joint if you're back here. So it's not a tall space back here whatsoever. There is a coat hanger up here. I don't know if you can see that, but it exists. Another interesting thing that I found in the back seat of my Fiat 500 is this, which is basically a flat tire kit. It's an air compressor, but it also has basically Fix-A-Flat in it, which has previously been used, so that probably doesn't work anymore. I can see it here in the tube. So this car doesn't come with a spare, it just comes with an air compressor and Fix-A-Flat. So they kind of hoped that that would get you home. I also found a scissor jack in here. I don't know if this came with the car. It doesn't really have any Fiat markings on it or anything, although this sticker sure does look like it could be from a Fiat 500. The other thing is I haven't found anything to actually actuate the jack with. That's what I found here in the back seat. If you know about the jack and why it might be in this car, and if it's supposed to be in this car, let me know, because I haven't found a better storage place for it than in the floor of the back seat. And same with this. It's got Velcro on it, so I assumed it sticks somewhere, maybe under the seat, I don't know. Interestingly, the people in the back do have pockets, both on the driver and passenger side. And again, here's my knee room. I'm actually not even touching the seat. I wouldn't want to ride a long way back here, but it's totally doable. All right, moving around to the inside. The cool thing about steering wheel controls is you have the buttons on the back as well, which I find really useful. Over here you have a skip and next track button, and on this side you have the volume buttons on the back of the steering wheel. I really like how Chrysler does that. I know most of the people have something on the front, but it's so much easier to use on the back. The only downside is there's no labeling, so you kind of have, if you don't already know, you have to kind of figure it out by trial and error. Here you can see the buttons on the back of the steering wheel, and where your hand normally sits, they're just really close right there, so super easy to get to. Looking around the interior, the first thing you're greeted with is this awesome circular gauge cluster here. A lot of glare on it right now, but it's got a tack in the middle ring, and on the outside it's got the speedometer. And you also get a little boost gauge over here with a shift light that turns on in the middle when it's time to shift. It's really just a red line light, because basically once you hit red line, then it tells you to shift up. Over here on this stock, normal lights, blinkers, brights, as you would expect. No auto headlights, unfortunately, just on and off. Over here on this stock, you have wipers. This actually has 3 speeds. There's intermittent, low, and high. And there's no way to change the intermittent speed, so 3-speed wipers. Pull for washing the windshield, bump up for mist. This outer section is for the rear windshield wiper, so up to wash it and down to turn it on, basically. And On this one, there's no intermittent speed on the rear wiper. It's just off or on. On the end here, there is the secret trip button. Right here, you have the secret trip button. This is super cool and useful, and I'll show you what that does. So that's the super annoying beep you get every time you turn the car on without your seatbelt on. Even if you turn it all the way on, you get that. Another cool thing is, as you've just noticed, or maybe you didn't, it says left front door open. There's only 2 doors on this thing, so I always find it funny that it tells me that the front one is open, as if there was another one to be open. So once the car is on or turns on, you get to the trip computer. And so you always have your mileage, the time, but this third line down here, you can kind of pick what you want. And I was actually surprised there was this much functionality, being as this is really the only information screen in the whole car other than the radio. So you can get your instantaneous economy, average speed, travel time on trip odometer A, and then a whole nother one for trip B. You get the date. Here's your range. It calculates how much range you have left, 152 miles on half tank. Sounds about right. And then of course you get your distance, and I like to leave it on average economy A. I find that super interesting. There's a lot of other stuff that this display can show. It's actually really nice that they have a miles per hour readout down here, because even though this, let's see if you can see it a little bit better with the lights on, even though the speedometer readout is lovely, as this big red thing starts to cover stuff up, it's hard to tell exactly where it is. So having the speed readout is really nice. Over here we have the sport button. So press this guy. It says sport up in the top of the gauge cluster right there. You can see you can turn it on and off, and that makes this car a totally different thing. At first I kind of complained about the throttle remapping, but it's actually super awesome. It makes it way easier to downshift and just blip the throttle to get it to the right RPM for a downshift. So sport mode is super awesome when you're actually driving and trying to rev match your downshifts. Here's the radio. As I mentioned, the buttons are kind of scratched. This is the power button. You have your volume up and down buttons, which would be kind of annoying, except like I said, you have it on the back of the steering wheel. But really no knobs in this interior, which is kind of an interesting design choice. Everything is buttons, and there's also a lot of blank buttons here on the stereo. Again, kind of an interesting design choice. Why they didn't make the whole top half of this and bottom half of this a button, I don't know. All right, let's talk climate control. Obviously, this is the phone mount that came on here. I haven't taken it off. Don't know that I'll use it, though. It's kind of a weird place for a phone mount with the manual transmission being right here and the throws being so long. But obviously, you've got auto climate control. It should be obvious what all these things do. Turn the AC compressor on and off, recirculate. And then, kind of weirdly, you have in this climate control panel ESC off button, as well as the fog lamps. On cars with heated seats, I believe they moved the fog lamp button over here, and the bottom two become the left and right heated seat button. Unfortunately, mine does not have that feature, which would sure be nice here in the Pacific Northwest. On this side, you have your temperature up and down control, and on this side, you have your fan speed. And when the car comes on, as I'll turn it on now, when you turn the climate control on, you get your temperature readout and your fan speed readout. If you want to go into manual mode, you can point the air wherever you want it over here, and sometimes multiple of these guys are available at the same time. I thought it was interesting that they made a whole nother button for defrost and feet. It's interesting you can't push defrost and feet at the same time. You have to use this defrost and feet. However, if you want it up top and on your feet, you can push those at the same time. So, interesting design choice. While we're on the subject of climate controls, I did want to draw attention to the vent situation. These two vents here are great. They work exactly like you'd expect them to, and you can turn them off or on. They're great. Now, the vents over on the side, I've determined that they basically never get air to you. There's really no way that I can adjust this vent where it will get air to me between all these things that are here. You can barely even see it over there. If you look over on this side, it might even be more clear. It's actually angled basically toward the door. Even if you have it pointing all the way this way, it's hard to get the air to come towards you. The vent is kind of on the back of, on the outside of the curved dash panel on that side and on this side, and it's just not super helpful, but it does blow air into the cabin, but other than that, it doesn't do much. Your window switches are right down here. This took me a while to get used to. Actually really interesting, the doors in this car are really bare. You look over at the passenger side and you'll notice there's basically nothing on the door. There's no switches or anything. No door lock back here. So you might be wondering where, obviously we know the window switch for the passenger is right here. So this controls the passenger window. Interestingly enough, both windows are auto down, but neither window is auto up. And the other thing that's interesting, probably won't work right now because I have the door open, but the door locks are integrated into the door handle. So if you want to lock the door, you push it forward like that, pull it like that to unlock. So there's no separate lock switch, which I actually really like. So as I mentioned, the door locks are actually power locks, but again, there's nothing up. There's no lock switch down here. There's no lock switch in the center on the ceiling. The only way to lock and unlock the doors is to press this. But it actually actuates both doors at the same time. So you'll see over here, this door is now locked. And if I want to unlock it, I can pull on the driver's side and it unlocks the passenger side door. So super neat that the door locks can be controlled like that. Again, there's only two doors, so no big deal. Of course, mirror controls over here. All right, going back up here to this system, I was actually surprised how many features were in here. Speed display, you can actually turn that off if you don't like it. Auto close. So basically once you start moving, it automatically locks the car. That's on and I like that. So basically once you get up to like 20, the doors lock. Here's where you can turn on and off the daytime running lights. I leave them on. The shift up indicator, the GSI stands for gear shift indicator. And you can basically, the options for that are basically you can have it on all the time or only when you're in sport mode. I just have it only when I'm in sport mode. I don't really know why you'd need it any other way. This has hill start assist and you can turn it on and off in here. I have it off right now. And that's it. As you'll notice, I do have the lovely check engine light on. As I mentioned, that's due to the gas cap. Down in the center, we have the handbrake. It's actually quite a chunky handbrake, but it gets the job done. And interestingly enough, the cup holders up here are smaller than the two in the back. So there are 4 cup holders in this car. There's none in the doors, but these two are actually really small. Maybe only big enough for a 16-ounce bottle of water like you'd buy at a gas station. This little slot actually is just big enough to hold my phone, but it hits this dash area as well. Obviously the gear shift lever is here. It's clunky when it goes into and out of gear, not in such a good way. So and they've got pretty large throws from the factory. A lot of people replace this with a short shifter. Steering wheel here has a flat bottom, kind of interesting, and it has some it's really actually girthy and has quite a large grip up here and here. Very nice to drive with. Just thought I'd show you how bad the rearward visibility gets with those headrests up. You can still see right down the middle, but really encroaches on your blind spots. Again, this car is really short, but you do have a really good view from the driver's seat. You can see quite a bit out the side. But when I go to look over on this side, it's not quite as good. The D-pillar, or I guess the C-pillar on this car is really thick. And depending on where this seat is, it can also block that little back window or just in front of here. So I actually find that I'm more often checking my blind spot twice on the passenger side of the car rather than on the driver's side. Up top we have the controls for the sunroof right here. That lets you open and close or vent it. Up here, we have controls for the lights. Now, it took me a while to figure out exactly how to use both lights. Interestingly enough, this control controls the lights individually. So if you want the left one on, you push here, left one comes on, right one comes on. So that controls the lights individually, like if you need a map light. This one controls the lights together. So if you want both of them on, you can do it here. This is the door position and the off position. So kind of counterintuitive how that works. If I was trying to turn my map light on, I probably wouldn't have initially come over here to turn it on, but that's how it works. I was also surprised that this car has a Bluetooth phone capability. There's the microphone right there. One unique thing about the sunroof, whether positive or negative, is the fact that it doesn't have a normal shade. It just has this mesh shade. One kind of cool thing about that is you can have the shade closed and the vent or the sunroof open itself and still get air through and be shaded. But on the downside, you're never completely shaded from the sun. Even when you close the roof, you can still get quite a bit of light through there. If I was in the southwestern Florida, I'm not sure I would be a fan of that. On the sun visor, you have a little mirror, but no light. And actually, this is so cheap that, as you can see, this piece of plastic just slides in here, and the fact that my garage door opener is on here is actually preventing it from opening all the way. So really interesting how that just slides into that piece of vinyl. Like I said, no light here. If you want the light, I guess you turn this on. Doesn't do too much for you, but you know, that's fine. No light on the passenger side either. Interesting thing about these sun visors is that they come out forward and they don't extend or retract or anything. They go over to the side, of course, like you would expect, but they only cover half of the window at best. So if you're the driver, I might be able to see easier on the passenger side. You can see how little of the window that thing covers. There's no way to slide it in or out. That's just what you get. Pretty sorry effort, unfortunately. Thanks for watching my video here at Wheels and Things about my Fiat 500 Abarth. I gave you the tour of the car, kind of hit on all the details that I really noticed, but if you notice any more, please comment, let me know what I missed. Like and subscribe as well. I would really appreciate it. It would really help me be able to keep doing this, or give me tips on how I could make it more interesting. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by Wheels and Things.